In this video, I would like to talk to you guys about one of the most interesting philosophers and historians ever, named Oswald Spengler. All right, he is not kind of a philosophical superstar like Hegel, Nietzsche, and Marx, but I think he's actually deeper and more profound than Nietzsche. Right. Uh, so Spengler wrote a book called Decline of the West, okay, which is definitely one of the best books ever written. The prose is just so beautiful. And the conclusions he makes in that book are very far reaching, okay? I mean, they're just incredibly deep and incredibly profound. All right, so this Oswald Spengler guy, okay, who was he? Essentially just a German guy, born in the late 19th century, and he went to university. He loved everything, mathematics and literature and philosophy, but he was like his greatest passion was history. Okay, so he read lots and lots of history. He spoke several languages, and he came up with this, sort of insight that Western civilization is coming towards its end. Okay, it's dying. All right. So how did he come up with this, gloomy conclusion, and what does it imply, and to what extent has it been confirmed or discredited in the 100 years since it was written during World War One? So, in order to understand Spengler, there are two major influences. He had two kind of schools of philosophy he adhered to. The first one is the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. So, what did Nietzsche say? His philosophy is pretty controversial, pretty provocative. So Nietzsche continued Schopenhauer's, project, you could say. By the way, guys, I have a terrific video on Schopenhauer. If you, you should probably check it out before you get back to this video. So Nietzsche followed in Schopenhauer's footsteps to develop, this philosophy of the will. This kind of irrational force at the basis of everything. And like I said, for details, check out my Schopenhauer video. And one of his first greatest, books by Nietzsche was called Birth of Tragedy. Okay, and in this text, Nietzsche, kind of looks at, his kind of question of will, and whether you affirm will or you deny it. Okay, so essentially, healthy people are those who, essentially satisfy their will. I mean, you could, almost say, do what thou will in a, Aleister Crowleyan sense. But that's not, quite what Nietzsche meant. He essentially meant, kind of healthy, life, which is embracing chaos to some extent. Okay, so he called this, Dionysian, um, the force of Dionysus. My name is after Dionysus, by the way. So Dionysus, was this god. He sort of celebrating. Dionysus was pretty damn fun. It was a lot of drinking and just this dancing, and I mean, it was essentially nightclub party with drugs. I mean, it was drinking, but people really got into it, and they really went crazy during the celebration of Dionysian uh, Dionysian festivals. By the way, they're also known as Bacchanalia. Kind of a famous later term. So that's kind of healthy life. Okay, it's irrational, it's embracing chaos, it's Dionysus. But there is this kind of life denying, will denying way to live, this will-denying philosophy, which Nietzsche associates with the god Apollo. So Dionysian versus Apollonian elements in Greek, culture. And Nietzsche said that earlier in their history, Greeks were, kind of embracing Dionysus, and he analyzes the three greatest tragedians of ancient Greece. Of course, I'm talking about Sophocles, Aeschylus, and Euripides. And he says, the first two, Sophocles and Aeschylus, stories like the famous Oedipus story, and a whole bunch of others, they are Dionysian. They embrace chaos, even though this, kind of leads to pain and suffering, but they embrace life as it is. They affirm will, chaos, so they're, kind of representatives of, healthy sort of life, all right? These two tragedians. But something really changes with Euripides, okay? Euripides kind of brings in logic, okay? He brings in the Apollonian element into sort of Greek culture, and that's when things begin to go downhill, okay? And of course, sort of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, they, were following in this sort of logical Apollonian, pathway. And this is the key concept. So Nietzsche says that's when, Greek civilization essentially began to decline, and that's when it died. Okay, so once Apollonian element was embraced, with its logic and rationality, and with its, constant questioning, civilizations begin to decline. Okay, that's the fundamental concept in Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy, and Spengler kind of really was interested by this. Like, wow, it's like, kind of you get intellect, kind of you get these advanced sciences, advanced math, advanced philosophical system, but at the same time, that's when you kind of reject life as such. So once you have too much intellect in your, culture, it's the beginning of the end, for Spengler. And he develops this big, doctrine of, history, which he applies to all the major civilizations. So Nietzsche just, applied it for Greeks, but, Spengler kind of expanded it, extrapolated it for pretty much all major civilizations. So Chinese, Indian, Egyptian, the Greeks, which Nietzsche talked about, and, most important, the Western civilization. So he calls it the Faustian civilization, named after, Goethe's Faust. By the way, like I said, he was influenced by two schools. The first one was, Nietzsche's philosophy, and the second one was the works of Goethe. So, Goethe was this incredible genius, polymath. He spoke several languages. He wrote one of the greatest works of literature ever, Faust. He was a scientist. He was a historian. He was a, freaking geologist. He had like 2,000 rock species collected. Just, one of the greatest minds. You can call him the German Aristotle. He has been described as, one of the greatest minds. And Spengler was influenced by sort of, his poem, his epic poem, Faust. All right, so Faust essentially is, the Western civilization. All the mindset of the Western civilization. And by the way, each civilization has a mindset, you can say. So you know what? I don't want to make it one long video. I'm going to break it down into, a few shorter size videos. So that's it for this video, guys.